All right, so today I get to talk to you about what we've done in Flow Connect. You're going to hear from quite a few of our product owners and product managers today and tomorrow. They've done some really impressive things over the past quarter in the product line. Well, my job here up on stage today is to help you understand what we've done over the past few years of development. Flow Connect has been a project that we started to execute quite some time ago and has a lot of features. When we started this project, what we thought to do was to come out to you all and give you quarter over quarter enhancements. So that is what we present in our quarterly updates. Again, you will see that from my colleagues, but my job here is to help you understand the benefits that come along with Connect from the beginning of time. And we have an hour to do it. So Flow Connect is the completely new product line for Flow Classic. It was rebuilt from the ground up. We did not take code from our old product and maneuver it into our new product line. We started fresh and we've added a lot of new features with that. It is built on a multi-tenant architecture. Unlike our monolithic code base that we had within Flow Classic, we now have the ability to deliver on new capabilities almost on a weekly cadence. We'd like to even increase that further, but right now we typically sit at about a week or two in new features. So the benefit of Connect under this evergreen model is that you never need to really manage your updates. Now, for those customers who are on Connect already, you do know that is not true for the connector agent today, but for the most part, that is true for the product line. Now, this modern architecture allows us to scale significantly better than our predecessor. We allow for our customers to have parallel processing, which supports higher volumes of transactions. So for you, the benefit could be communicating with things like IFS Cloud and Infor M3, and doing it so that you can actually get more executions in the same amount of time. It does account for peak load resilience, which is another benefit here, and we allow in the future for our capabilities to be deployed across multiple cloud-based data centers in the future. So that is the benefit of like this componentized architecture that we've built the new product line on. And we built it with security in mind. So here on the multi-tenant cloud, we actually have strict data isolation processes specifically for our connectors. So it is multi-tenant, but we do recognize that our customers use this to communicate with their ERP systems. And for that reason, we've actually isolated and segmented out those connectors. We support all types of authentications and authorizations, and we have encryption both at rest and in transit. So I think a few people talked a little bit about security in those questions. We've done a ground up build of our security, and we feel really confident that it is more secure than our predecessor in Classic. Now I'm going to use a lot of terms today, and it gets a little bit confusing. When you work in the R&D department, we get to talk all the time about these languages. I'm going to use new terms, and I hope that you guys can relay those terms. So in Classic, we had our Flow server. We had Studio, which was the tool that we used to develop the applications. We have our clients, which I'll use that term today. That is like the Android, iOS client, and the web client. We do have our portal application, the newest being Portal 2. And we have the integration engine for those who don't know. Also from there, we have connector services, which allow us to communicate from our cloud-based system to our on-premise ERPs that still exist. Now, in all of that, we also have these same product lines in Flow Connect. We have what we refer to as the hub, and this is the central administration of our product. So instead of having to log into Studio to admin, instead we're going to be inside of a web browser. We are going to talk a little bit this time about a web-based browser for the Flow Designer. The Designer is the new term for the Studio. We've got a refreshed look on our clients, and we also have what we call connector agents taking over for the connector services. So I'm going to use a lot of these terms. It might get a little confusing for a bit, but recognize that they are just new terms for similar products with benefits that come along with them. So let's talk a little bit about the key facts and differentiators between the two product lines. The first is that central web-based admin console. This is what we refer to as the hub. The hub is your central location for administering Novacura Flow in Connect. Now, one of the nice benefits that come along with the hub is this ability to expand past one organization. So I always like to talk about the benefit of this. A lot of our customers, they work with partners and they work with us, Novacura. We are often there to support you in your development of your applications if we're not developing them for you. Our partners do the same. And the benefit of this tool is that I do not need to log in anymore across 8 different studio environments that could be behind firewalls. So we can log in once and have access to as many organizations as we're permissioned to. In the next schematic, you'll see that I can log in and have access to Flowington, Novacura Labs, Novacura Presales, in any customer environment. I'm sure you'll hear from a couple customer cases here this week. And what you're going to find is that I've helped many customers. They just ping me on Teams and say, I have this issue. And as soon as I get that ping, I say, can you send me an invite? I'm immediately into their organization, helping them in applications. That is the strength that comes along with Connect. Now, within that user management, there's also these abilities to granularly privilege controls. So when IFS terms, right? We talk a little bit about segregation of duties. That's a very common term when you talk permissioning. So we have something similar. We're able to permission specific users to do certain functions within the development lifecycle of an application. This allows you to be more in compliance of controls systems. It allows for simplified onboarding and ultimately just empowers your teams to make it easier to access the tool. That permissions looks a little something like this. So unlike Flow Classic, where you had to either select 3 levels of development, I believe they were Workflow, Admin Basic, and Admin All. Now you can actually permission specific use cases where you may have a user who should manage connectors, but shouldn't be able to invite users. And inviting users is as simple as sending out an invite. Here you'll note that I'm sending an invite to a new user in my company and giving them access rights immediately. And we'll talk a little bit later about SCIM and the ability to provision these users automatically. The environment and connector management has to be one of my favorite features. I've lived in the world of Classic now for a bit, where I've had to log into a dozen different studio environments. As I publish workflows, my test environment has a different connector configuration than my prod environment and has a different connector configuration than my dev environment. That is a thing of the past. Here, what we have in Flow Connect is a single point of control. Now, admins can go into the application and they're able to manage their connectors from one-stop shop. You can create an IFS 10 application connector here and quickly see access to your 3 Novacura environments, dev, test, QA, and production, which will be over to the right. And then you can actually configure those directly in this client as a quick overview. So we talk a lot with our customers about how should I configure this to connect to my IFS installations or my Infor. Dev of Novacura can connect into your dev of IFS. The test of Novacura can connect to your test or UAT, and prod would connect to your production environments of those same ERP systems. And you could see that all directly from the hub now in one false swoop. Application management has changed a little bit from the previous version to this new version. Now we handle these through something called application packages. So instead of having a very long list of apps over to the left, we can now generate packages, and then within those packages, we can actually have applications. Now this is a little bit of I'd say a pretty big change compared to our old product line. Here, you have to be a little bit smart about how you handle applications. Our goal is to try to move towards application-based development. That we have some thoughts as to what the future of that could look like. And therefore, what we've started with is building apps under a package. And in the example shown here, you'll note that we have a travel and expense app. And then within those apps, as an example, we have things like confirming expenses, adding expense reports, so on and so forth. Now we can also build what we call components under those out to the right side. We're going to talk a little bit about FlowScript here in the very near future. But FlowScript is, well, let's take a step back on FlowScript. I think what we recognize is that AI development is here. We've all seen what AI can do. We've probably all seen GitHub Copilot. We recognize that, and we want to start to adopt and adapt that type of processes within our own development. And I think FlowScript is going to be the thing that drives us into that future. Benefit of FlowScript is that it empowers a little bit of creativity. But honestly, the problem with FlowScript is that it's technical, and we are a low-code platform. So how do we bridge what is low-code, no-code, with high-code development? When I show you the next few screens here, you're going to look at FlowScript modules, which are componentized FlowScript applications that can be used across many different packages. And you'll note that it's quite technical. Probably for most of our developers, that is tough to make, this script. But we also believe that this will be the future of our product line. So somehow we need to bridge the gap between what we want to have here, which is creativity, and ultimately low code. Now in these examples, you'll see here FlowScript modules for Infor M3 REST, Infor M3 programs. You'll see REST calls for IFS projections. And you'll also see general ones like this to-do API, for example. Now I'm going to show an example of how FlowScript modules get used within the product. In this example, what's going to happen is we're going to use a FlowScript module in an application to parse GS1 barcode standards. So GS1 is just a type of barcoding, and what I want to do is take a QR code or a 2 or 3D type of code, and I want to parse that into multiple fields in the system. And I hope from this you'll see that there is power within these FlowScript modules. The first step of this process is for a user to open up a FlowScript module and create this. Once again, quite complex, I would say, generally speaking. Not something that I'd say most of our developers are capable of doing today. Then once created, we can actually test this. So for those who don't know, we have something called the FlowScript Playground inside of our new product line that's been released. The FlowScript Playground will actually allow you to use FlowScript and FlowScript functions directly inside the designer, test those, and see how they work. So in this case, this is testing that GS1 barcode FlowScript. Now from there, a user can add one of these scan element steps, and they can go ahead and put in a script step. And in that script step, they can use a function, that parse barcode function, which has already been developed as a FlowScript module, to execute that, to execute the function to parse out the information, and then use that information within the fields of the screen by default. So a few steps in hopes that when I see the application, it's going to go ahead and allow me to scan. And from a scan, I can take a QR code, and it will auto-parse that information directly in the client, right? So again, using a FlowScript module now allows you to execute that code across many different applications. So I think GS1 is a really good standard that gets used quite a bit, and we may want to be able to execute that in all of our applications. So in the old days of Classic, we have to recognize that meant that I needed to keep up with that code across 10 separate apps. Now I have it referenced once across 10 apps, and I only ever manage it one time. But that flow script is actually quite complex. So what we've spent time doing over the past year is building what we call the Flow Script Copilot. I'm sure everyone's heard Copilot, so I won't spend too much time talking about it, but this is an AI-powered assistant designed to help you write your flow script. And what it's been built on is our documentation. It's been built on some examples that we've provided, as well as test cases of our own flow script. So we've taken a lot of our knowledge and built a Copilot out of it. Now, the Flow Script Copilot can actually get ran from the designer. In the Flow Script Playground, you can open up the Flow Script Copilot. And you could start chatting with it and ask it questions to perform specific functions within the system. In this one, we're going to use a pretty general statement. We are going to ask the Copilot to create a table for us. And that table could have specific fields. The Flow Script Copilot will respond back, and it'll provide the inputs that I need into the Flow Script Playground. So it will give me the code that I can copy from one side of this application into the next. Show of hands, how many people can write that themselves today in the audience? Yeah? Okay, nice, got a couple. Most people can't, I cannot. I will tell you that much. And then what we can do is we can actually use the context of that chat to make it even better. Once we see the results, we may tell it that it did a good job. It's called reinforcement of the model. And then we can go back and ask it to add on to that. We could say, add a new field into this table. And the Flow Script Copilot will respond back. Now look, it's not perfect. In this third example that you're about to see here, we actually ask it to write a function to do the same exact thing that we're asking for right here. And it doesn't do it successfully. It actually fails. Now, we can provide it that reinforced learning and tell it it didn't do a good job. And then what we get back on our side is the ability to better that through our own development processes. So we are continuing to iterate on this model and make it better. So your feedback is just as important as ours. I'll ask one more question. Show of hands, how many people have used the Flow Script Copilot? Okay, very nice. So in this last example, again, it's asking for it to return a function. It doesn't do a great job, fails here, but then when we give it more context and we provide it the ability to have some exampled data, it actually will come back with this function, which works. The tool is quite powerful. I've used it quite a bit myself. My statement, I think, in general on this tool is that it works really well for, I'd say, easy to medium use cases. There are some very complex use cases out there, and I think that's where, at this point, it doesn't do an excellent job, but something we continue to work on. And then when you do provide it feedback, you'll just tell it exactly what it did poorly. It helps us with our training model, so please try to use it if you can. Now, application debugging has had a big change. No longer are the days of committing offline workflows or even committing applications to see them in a mobile device before you actually test that that application is worthy of committing. I think this really allows for safe testing of the product. So here in this example, we have an application under an app package for travel and expense. And what we're going to do is we're going to open this up in the designer tool. That designer tool today is run on your local PC. You can go ahead and make changes to that application. In this example, what we're going to do is we are going to change a user step in the process and add a new field. When we add that field, we can go ahead and without committing it, we can build an application live and actually test it before we commit the product. So here, I'm just going to add a text label. We'll call it customer. We'll allow it to have an empty input. We'll hit OK. And now if I hit the little play button up to the top right, what it will do is it'll actually build that application so that I can see it directly in the diagnostic mode client is what we refer to it as. So this diagnostic mode client, the benefit here is that it actually runs either on a Windows client or it can run directly in a web browser. It actually lets you see off to the left side the application and what it would look like live. So that is the real app. And off to the right, you'll get all of the variables that can be searched on. You can sort those variables. You can even search on the value of those variables. I really think this is the new way that people will begin to develop their workflows. I've seen so many times in Flow Classic about 1,000 different commitments of the same application. When you ask why, none of them are good versions of those apps. They're always bad versions that someone was testing and they didn't know how to get it to the mobile client. This will change the way that you develop applications. Now, the deployment process here, our goal is to try to get you from testing an app to putting it into production in a quicker manner. Our hope is that from the development and deployment process that you're able to quickly test and then deploy across all environments. So here you'll note that I have 4 separate Novacura Flow environments in an organization. I take my tasks and I am able to deploy that into the environment that I want under a specific version. Not too dissimilar from the way Subscribe worked in the past. However, instead of pulling the data from a environment to environment, I'm going to push the data. And just as quickly as I deploy, I can on-deploy. If I have a mistake that is made within the application, I'm not happy with that version, I can quickly take it off of the environment. We've done some redesigning of the user interfaces as well. This is a look at what the web client and iOS client look like for application packages. These are groupings of applications. And then this is what it looks like for applications, which are underneath of a package. We have a lot of information on these screens, but you'll see screenshots of list selection, grid, calendar, and user elements, other user element steps. The benefit here being that we try to make some changes in the way that we handle the client looks. I know these are small things, but you'll talk to the UX team today and tomorrow, and you'll see that we've taken a lot of thought into how we lay these out. We used to have full white backgrounds, which didn't contrast with the fields that you should have exposed and executed on. We've made changes there. We've made changes to the calendar view to give it more information up front. These are all areas we spend a lot of time thinking about how we should adjust to make it easier for the end user. But we've also provided our end user more personalization capabilities. Those personalizations allow things like favoriting applications. So instead of the developer telling me my journey on my mobile app, what I can do now as an end user is decide which apps are my favorite. I always use this example. Just because Andreas likes to time report every day doesn't mean I like to time report every day. My journey may be a little different. I may submit expenses more often as a salesperson. So the way that Flow Classic worked is that every person got the same journey through the application, and now in Flow Connect, we allow them to personalize that journey a bit more through favorite applications. We also support what we refer to as dependent fields. These are context-aware filtering. So this was a big request by our customers for quite some time, something that our portal was capable of doing, but not the clients. Now what we've supported is drop-down lists being able to dynamically adjust based on prior selections. As an example, you'll see here, if you pick a customer, we want to filter the sites that are available for that customer. And if I pick the sites, I want to see the assets available for that site. And I don't want to leave the screen to do it. In the past, we used to have to put those 3 fields into separate user elements and make them go forward 3 times. And if they made a mistake, they had to go back 3 times. Make a change and then go forward again. That is not the future. In Connect, we have this new and improved user experience, which we think simplifies navigation and errors. We've also added image processing. So now what we do is we allow our users to mark up images directly inside the client in Flow Connect. This is really impressive for things like fault reporting, where you have a machine failure or some issue, and you want to be able to add text, or you want to be able to mark up an image to show exactly where you have a problem. We've also added visual enhancements inside of lists. We think the benefit here is that developers can now add images into these list items. From a business value perspective, what this typically means is that you could add things like product catalogs for online purchasing, maybe some service operations. But realistically, what it comes down to is like improved decision making, right? We want a user to be in and out of a user screen as quick as possible. When you add images to a list, it only allows them to pick in a quicker manner. And dark mode, one of my favorite, but really there are benefits to dark mode that aren't technical benefits. This dark mode actually allows you to have better battery performance on your client. It means you're going to last a little bit longer if you put your mobile client into dark mode. So energy efficiency, it does have improved focus and less eye strain for users. We've made those same redesigns that we did within the client, but we've also taken those to Portal. So for those customers who don't use Portal today, Portal is our web-based application. What we've done is we've tried to seamlessly integrate this with the hub. So inside of Flow Classic, these two were completely separate products. Now what you'll see in the development journey is that every customer automatically sees Flow Connect Portal as part of the product line. It means that you're going to see it directly when you're building applications. So now you'll see portal pages, applications, and in the future, you're actually going to see automations if you haven't used it. We've increased things like custom branding and theme capabilities of this product. You know, there are customers today that use this for B2B processes. We do have customers, most of our customers, I'd say, use it in B2E. But the hope here is that we're able to brand it directly for your business. And what Malin and Ola will talk about is probably the most exciting portlet that we've come out with, the custom content portlet. I think this portlet just sort of shows exactly where we want to go in our future. It really empowers developers to build whatever they want. No longer bound by the type of portlets that we provide, but instead completely dynamic and flexible to build out your own user experience the way you want in Portal. Yeah, I think this is going to be an exciting one for everyone. Now, Portal is actually only missing, I believe, 2 portlets at this point. So we have all of the following portals available in Connect. I've done an assessment of probably most of the customers here and know where you guys sit on your portals. But the ones that are missing are the Scheduler and Gantt, and they are coming soon to Flow Connect. Now, we spent a lot of time thinking about machine workflows. Not a huge use case for our customers, but one that we hope is going to be empowered in the future. We refer to these as automations now. So what we can support in automations is both HTTP triggers, and we can do scheduled workflows today. And we've really sat down and evaluated how do we want to be used as an integration engine in the future. The benefit of our new automations capability is that a developer can actually come in and get more scheduling capabilities. This was a huge request from our customer base. They asked us quite often to be able to support many different types of scheduling. I am showing you the base use of this, but there are complex, more dynamic capabilities embedded in scheduling. And all of these can actually also be called via a trigger, meaning you can call an HTTP request and get back information. So we can be used for integration capabilities as well. Some systems refer to this kind of concept as webhooks. What it means is I've changed some data in one system, and I want to use Novacura to return that data to the system as well. So you can call it as a service if you would. And one of the nice new features we've added is the ability to see these executions. So our customers complain about this one quite a bit in Classic, we think. That now what you can do is you can actually see every step within an individualized execution. So over to the right, this is showing a successful execution of a scheduled workflow called My First Automation. And over to the right side, you're actually seeing every single step within that workflow and whether it was successful or not. The goal here in the future is to be able to even rerun these and ultimately change data within them if possible. So if I was to fail on step 3 here, maybe I want to change some information before processing step 4. You'll also know the latency times inside of these steps, how long the duration took. Offline applications has been added to the product. You'll see a good demo here from Andreas today of offline applications, so I won't spend a tremendous amount of time talking about it. But it does look and feel similar to what we had in Classic. The same capabilities are built into Flow Connect. In the designer, you can configure the offline application to send data when you are connected, and the briefcase over there to the left side actually tells you what data you're going to bring down to the client as what we refer to as preload of data. So for those who have missed this, we have built the new import capabilities for IFS Cloud. This is a new process which is moved from the designer into the hub now. So this import process now allows us to go ahead and import directly into the hub the old applications of Flow Classic. So for those who are unfamiliar, I'm going to select a WAP package, and I'm going to tell it which package I want to import it into. A WAP file is just a list of flows. Now from here, I'm going to map a connector step, much like I used to do when I imported and exported workflows in Classic. So I'll say that the connector that it was is now going to be the connector that it is. And then I go ahead and see a list of flow script modules. Now these modules are tied to IFS projections, which allow us to call them in sort of SQL-esque statements. Now you'll note that the first 2 up there don't have modules, but the other 2 do have compiled modules. In the old worlds with the CS connector, I would have had to gone in and generated those modules. Now what we have is an application. That application will allow me to paste in those projections that I want to compile. So you'll see here I have a list of about 5 projections. And I want to go ahead and tag it with some information possibly so I can keep my system clean. And I can choose whether or not I want to update existing projections. But I'll skip that step and I'll go forward. Now what's happening behind the scenes is it's evaluating the metadata of IFS. That metadata helps us compile automatically a module for that projection. So you don't have to go into the system any longer and do any manual coding of the REST connector if you don't want. You're going to generate these modules. And you'll note that 2 modules were created of all those projections. The other 3 were skipped because they already existed. And now if I go back into the import module, I can refresh and my projections will automatically map. So from here, if I hit next, it's going to go ahead and give me a last step to import. And now I've gone ahead and imported an old Classic module, an old Classic workflow that was connected to IFS Cloud. And I've moved that now into the product for Flow Connect. Now, those do not come without some faults. Here in this example, there are some slight changes. We've made a few changes to things like flow script. We've also have to go ahead and commit our components that are being used, our fragments. So you'll see here as I go through this process, I can go ahead and commit this, give it a new version, and then reference that version in my application. So if I hit the refresh component, it'll actually go ahead and update that to my new version. Now the next step is to see all the other errors and try to get rid of them. This shows a step of what was converted from the IFS connector service that we used to have in Classic to a new script step using that SQL-esque type statement. And if I find the error that I have here in the sum quantity, there's no more such thing as is null or empty. So I just need to get rid of it and say is null. And these are some adjustments we've made to FlowScript because now what we have in FlowScript are types. And types become important downstream. So This is possible for you as a customer or a partner to do these upgrades yourselves, similar to the step that I'm walking through here, or we can do them for you. What I think the benefit we provide is that we know all of these capabilities. We also understand the issues that may come along with those import processes. In this example here, I'm just executing this app to make sure it's working. And once I'm happy with it, I can go ahead and publish it to an environment. So we think that this significantly streamlines the customers who are on IFS Cloud today using the connector service, their ability to come over to Flow Connect. The example is showing here the API calls that we've made directly to the system and the select parameters associated with those. So we've taken that complexity out of the loop for our customers. Now, we've also built translations, and we've made some changes to translations from Flow Classic to Flow Connect. We'll talk a little bit more about this today, but the way this looks is that there is a new translation concept called the phrase book. The phrase book is a central location that you will handle translations. No longer do you have to translate the same phrase over and over again inside the system. A great example, you may have an app that uses Hello World. Inside of Classic, what that meant is that I had to go into all the applications that used Hello World, and I had to translate that phrase individually 10 times if I had 10 applications. In the new world, the phrase book allows us to reference those. So what you're seeing over to the right side is what we refer to as phrases and languages, where you have a default for a specific phrase called documents, and then you have the translated version of it. And then what happens is in your user step, you just reference that by calling phrase.documents. Now this is built on a standard that we'll talk a little bit about today, but again, the power here is that you're going to spend less time in translating applications. The negative is that it takes a little bit of rework to get your applications translated from Flow Classic to Connect, because if you want the benefit of this, then you have to go ahead and add to the phrase book. Now you'll also hear from us about what we refer to as, some people say SCIM. It is SCIM. SCIM is allowing us to handle provisioning of users across applications. It is a standard across cloud-based and SaaS-based systems that gets used quite frequently. The idea here is that we're able to sync users across identity providers, and it looks a little something like this. So over to the left, what you have are users or groups to be provisioned. For those who are familiar with Azure, that means that you can see two of those user groups, and then the bottom is actually a specific user. Now what happens is in that process, which is provisioned to run some period of time per day, it'll actually go and create the same information over in Connect. So you are able to build out provisioned users automated on a specific batch frequency from Azure. Now, I say Azure because that's the one that we're using here for most of our customers, but it is a standard protocol, which means that there are other options. Some customers use Okta, for example, and in those cases, they have SCIM capabilities built in. So I would strongly suggest taking a look at this product. It is really powerful, and we are going to release this, I think, in the next couple of days, maybe weeks, if we haven't already. Yeah? Last but not least, I always like to say, a lot of the features that I sort of show here today, we've developed because of your feedback. We continue to listen, and we try our best to develop based on what you're asking for. The user dynamic fields is a great example. That's been a large request from us for some time. However, if you don't voice your opinion, we're unable to know the issues that you have. So I would strongly suggest that if you haven't logged into ideas.novacura.com, you do. We are constantly looking at feedback in here and trying to build it in. There's no better time than now to provide us that feedback before we start developing the feature. It is something that we're combing through and combining into something that becomes the new Connect product line. With that said, I think I leave it off to the next presenter, Łukasz. Yeah.